billionaire handed his platinum credit card to a struggling single mother in a grocery store and walked away. Less than 3 hours later, a transaction alert appeared on his phone. It wasn't designer clothes. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't a lavish shopping spree. It was something that made his blood run cold. Instantly, he knew his entire life was about to implode because in that moment, she made a purchase that would expose a secret he'd buried for months and trigger a scandal neither of them was prepared for. Before we begin, what will you rate this story from 0 to 10? And what part of the world are you watching from? Comment your country below. Let's build a global community rooted in kindness and second chances. If the story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Your support brings us closer to our 1K subscriber milestone and inspires us to keep creating more emotional stories of resilience, healing, and Black excellence. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your presence matters more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened when a poor single mother was handed a billionaire platinum credit card. What she did next will change your mindset towards poor people. 42-year-old Gregory Coulter had stopped believing people deserved second chances years ago. As founder and CEO of Coulter Development Corporation, a real estate empire worth $9.7 billion, he'd watched families beg for mercy while he signed demolition orders. His penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan had floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of a city he was systematically reshaping. He owned properties in 7 states. His custom suits cost more than most people paid in rent each month. Yet every night he lay awake feeling like a man suffocating in an oxygen-rich room. His late father, Richard Coulter, had hammered one truth into him since childhood. Compassion is a weakness successful men cannot afford. Gregory, the poor will always choose comfort over ambition. Hand them opportunity, they'll squander it and blame you for their failure. They lack what we have: discipline, vision, the strength to do what's necessary. Poverty isn't a circumstance. It's a character flaw. Gregory had lived by that creed for 42 years. Every business decision justified by market efficiency and shareholder value. Every displaced family reduced to a line item in quarterly reports. He'd never once stood face to face with the human cost of his empire building. Not without lawyers present. Not without liability waivers. Not without an exit strategy already drafted. But that bitter February evening, something fractured in the armor around his conscience. He was leaving the office after a contentious board meeting, stopping at an upscale North Side grocery store his assistant recommended. His cashmere overcoat cost $6,500. His briefcase contained contracts for a $200 million luxury development. His phone vibrated constantly with messages from investors, city officials, and architects, all demanding pieces of his empire's next move. Then he saw her in aisle 7. Gregory Coulter's empire rose from the ashes of other people's lives. Coulter Development Corporation didn't just build luxury condominiums and mixed-use commercial spaces. It erased neighborhoods. It turned communities into commodities. It transformed affordable housing into investment opportunities with 40% returns. The formula was brutally simple. Identify undervalued properties in gentrifying areas, acquire them through aggressive bidding or legal pressure, displace the existing tenants with minimal compensation, demolish the old structures, and construct something gleaming and unaffordable in their place. Gregory had perfected this process across Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. His portfolio included 47 high-end residential towers, 23 luxury retail complexes, and countless properties in various stages of acquisition and development. The money was staggering. His personal net worth had crossed $9.7 billion last quarter. Forbes featured him in their real estate mogul issue with the headline, "The Man Who Rebuilds Cities." What they didn't write about were the 3,000 families displaced in the last 5 years alone. The single mothers who lost affordable apartments. The elderly residents forced from neighborhoods they'd called home for decades. The small business owners whose leases weren't renewed. Gregory didn't think about them. He couldn't afford to. His father had taught him that sentimentality was the enemy of success. Richard Coulter had built the foundation of the empire before a heart attack claimed him at 64. He'd left Gregory more than wealth. He'd left a philosophy that justified everything. The market rewards the strong and starves the weak for a reason, his father would say over bourbon in his study. We're not cruel, Gregory. We're honest. We see the world as it is, not as bleeding hearts wish it would be. The poor lack discipline. They make bad decisions. They choose immediate gratification over long-term planning. If we don't profit from their weakness, someone else will. At least we do it efficiently. Gregory had built his entire identity on that foundation. He lived alone in a 12,000 square foot penthouse that echoed with silence. His relationships were transactional. His friendships were networking opportunities. His romantic encounters were brief and forgettable. He worked 80-hour weeks not because he needed more money but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling meant confronting the vast emptiness that had taken root where his humanity used to live. He told himself the emptiness was discipline, that the isolation was focus, that the gnawing sensation in his chest at 3 a.m. was just stress, just the price of excellence, just what separated winners from everyone else. He told himself his father was right about everything. He had to believe it, because if his father was wrong, then Gregory had spent 2 decades becoming a monster for no reason at all. Catherine Wallace stood at the register with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd counted every dollar too many times. Her worn leather purse sat open on the counter, coins sorted into neat piles, quarters, dimes, nickels. She was calculating before the cashier could finish scanning. A jar of peanut butter, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, a box of generic cereal, 2 cans of soup. The total came to $18.47. Catherine had $16.23. Her hands moved without hesitation, returning the bread to her basket. The cashier, a teenage girl with blue hair and bored eyes, didn't react. She'd seen this transaction 1,000 times. Catherine recalculated silently, her lips moving slightly. Still short. The soup went back. Now she had enough. Gregory watched from 3 aisles away, partially hidden behind an end-cap display of artisanal olive oils he'd never buy. He'd come here for convenience, not groceries. His refrigerator was stocked by a service. His meals were catered or eaten at restaurants where waiters knew his preferences. But his driver had called in sick, and Marcus, his assistant, suggested this store was on the route to the penthouse. Gregory had walked in intending to grab bottled water and leave. Instead, he couldn't stop watching Catherine. She wore a gray cardigan over a white long-sleeved shirt, both clean but faded from too many washes. Her jeans had a small tear near the knee that had been carefully stitched. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked tired in a way that transcended one sleepless night. This was the exhaustion of months, maybe years of carrying weight no one should carry alone. Beside her stood a little girl, maybe 7 years old, wearing a pink winter coat with a broken zipper. The child didn't whine, didn't beg for candy from the display rack within arm's reach, didn't complain about the bread and soup going back. She just stood there with the quiet patience of a child who'd learned that wanting things out loud only made her mother's face sadder. That silence cut through Gregory's chest like a blade. Catherine handed over her exact change. The cashier counted it mechanically, bagged the remaining items, and moved to serve the next customer. Catherine took her daughter's hand and turned toward the exit. Gregory moved without thinking. His father's voice roared in his head, warning him, mocking him, calling him weak. But something older than his father's philosophy pushed him forward. He intercepted them near the automatic doors. Catherine looked up, immediately wary. Gregory pulled out his platinum card before he could second-guess himself. "I have a proposition," he said. "Take this card. Use it for 24 hours. Buy whatever you need. No restrictions. Tomorrow night, same time, you return it here." Catherine stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Why? Call it a social experiment. I want to see what someone does with unlimited resources for one day." Her eyes narrowed with understanding that made Gregory uncomfortable. She wasn't looking at him with gratitude or excitement. She was studying him, reading him, seeing through the expensive suit to something ugly underneath. "You want to see if I'll steal from you," she said quietly. "You want to prove poor people can't be trusted." The accuracy of her assessment hit like a physical blow. Gregory's rehearsed explanation died in his throat. Catherine looked down at her daughter, then back at Gregory. Something shifted in her expression. Not acceptance. Something harder. Something that looked almost like resolve. She took the card from his hand. 24 hours, she said. Then you get your answer, and you leave us alone. She walked away before Gregory could respond. Her daughter's small hand in hers, his platinum card in her pocket. Gregory stood in the fluorescent light of the grocery store, watching them disappear into the winter darkness, already wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Gregory's penthouse felt colder than usual when he returned. The heating system maintained a perfect 72 degrees, but the chill came from somewhere deeper. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, a 30-year-old single malt that cost $400 per bottle, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The city sprawled below him, lights twinkling like fallen stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, Catherine Wallace held his credit card and unlimited access to his fortune. He opened his banking app for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. No transactions yet. The card sat in her pocket, dormant, a loaded gun she hadn't fired. Gregory's thumb hovered over the refresh button. This was absurd. He had legitimate work to do. Contract reviews, development proposals, a conference call with investors in Tokyo scheduled for midnight. Instead, he was staring at his phone like a teenager waiting for a text message. Marcus called at 9:47 p.m. "I heard something interesting from your security detail," his assistant said without preamble. "You gave your platinum card to a stranger in a grocery store. News travels fast." "Gregory, what the hell are you doing?" "Testing a hypothesis." "You don't test hypotheses. You acquire properties and maximize returns." "This is..." Marcus paused, searching for the right word. "Uncharacteristically reckless." Gregory took a long sip of bourbon. The liquid burned pleasantly down his throat. "My father used to say that desperation makes thieves of everyone. That the poor lack self-control. That given opportunity, they'll always choose immediate gratification over restraint. So you handed unlimited funds to a broke woman to prove your dead father's cynicism, correct?" Marcus's voice carried a note of disbelief. "That's either brilliant or insane, and I'm leaning toward insane. She'll prove him right. They always do. And if she doesn't?" Gregory didn't answer. He couldn't articulate the fear that lived beneath his certainty. If Catherine Wallace proved his father wrong, then everything Gregory had built, every family he'd displaced, every community he'd demolished, all of it rested on a foundation of lies. Better to believe in his father's gospel than to face that abyss. Marcus sighed. "I'll have the fraud department monitoring. If she tries to withdraw cash or makes suspicious purchases, we can freeze the account." "No. Let it play out. 24 hours. No interference." After Marcus hung up, Gregory returned to the window. His reflection stared back at him, a ghost superimposed over the city. His father's voice echoed from memory, words spoken over dinner when Gregory was 16. "We're not like them, son. We see the long game. We delay gratification. We build empires while they chase lottery tickets and blame the world for their failures. Compassion is a luxury successful men cannot afford." Gregory had believed every word. He'd built his entire identity on that foundation. The ruthless acquisitions, the aggressive displacement strategies, the calculated indifference to human suffering. All of it justified by his father's philosophy that poverty was a moral failing, not a circumstance. His phone buzzed at 10:23 p.m. Transaction alert. CVS Pharmacy. $47.83. Gregory's heart hammered as he opened the detailed breakdown. The app took a moment to load, each second stretching into eternity. When the itemized receipt appeared, he read it 3 times, certain he was misinterpreting. Children's Tylenol, children's cough syrup, vitamin C gummies, a thermometer, a box of tissues, hand sanitizer, no champagne, no designer anything, no frivolous luxury, just the desperate purchases of a mother whose child was sick. Gregory stood frozen, the bourbon forgotten in his hand. This wasn't the transaction he'd expected. This wasn't the story his father had promised. Catherine Wallace had unlimited resources, and she'd spent $47.83 on medicine for her daughter. Something cracked in Gregory's chest, a hairline fracture in the armor he'd worn for 2 decades. He sat down heavily on his leather sofa, the phone trembling slightly in his hand. The city lights blurred through the windows. His father's voice, usually so confident and clear, faltered in his memory. Gregory refreshed the app compulsively, waiting for the next transaction, dreading what it might reveal. Not about Catherine, about himself. The second transaction arrived at 6:47 a.m. Gregory hadn't slept. He'd spent the night on his sofa, phone on the coffee table, bourbon glass refilled twice then abandoned. When the alert buzzed, he grabbed it with hands that felt clumsy and desperate. Target, $89.50. He pulled up the itemized receipt. Girls' winter boots, size 2. A puffy coat with a working zipper. Thick socks, 3-pack. A knit hat and gloves set. Gregory stared at the list, his exhaustion making the words swim slightly. She'd had unlimited funds and bought her daughter a $34 coat from Target. Not Nordstrom, not Burberry. Target. The third transaction came at 9:15 a.m. Grocery store. $156.32. Gregory opened it immediately, scanning the list with growing unease. 2 weeks of actual groceries. Chicken breasts, ground beef, fresh vegetables, rice, pasta, canned goods, milk, eggs, bread. Nothing extravagant, nothing processed or pre-made. The purchases of someone who knew how to stretch ingredients, who planned meals carefully, who cooked from scratch because it was cheaper. Gregory sat at his dining table, a slab of Italian marble that cost $40,000 and seated 12, though he'd never had more than 4 people over at once. His own breakfast, prepared by his morning catering service, sat untouched. Smoked salmon, artisanal bread, imported cheese. He couldn't remember the last time he'd actually tasted his food. Marcus called at noon. I'm seeing the transactions. She's not exactly living up to your father's predictions. It's early, Gregory said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's been 14 hours. She spent less than $300. The day isn't over. Gregory, what are you afraid of? The question hung in the air. Gregory ended the call without answering because he didn't know how to explain the sensation building in his chest. It wasn't disappointment that Catherine was proving his father wrong. It was something far more terrifying. It was the dawning realization that he'd spent 20 years justifying cruelty with a philosophy that might be nothing more than inherited bigotry dressed up as economic theory. The fourth transaction appeared at 2:33 p.m. The New Horizon Women's Shelter. $40. Donation. Gregory stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She donated to a shelter. A woman who counted coins to buy peanut butter had unlimited resources and chose to give $40 to help other women in crisis. The practicality of her earlier purchases could be explained away as survival instinct. But this was character. He paced his penthouse like a caged animal. 12,000 square feet of expensive emptiness suddenly felt suffocating. The art on his walls, pieces worth millions that he'd bought because advisors said they were good investments, looked like evidence of a life wasted on accumulation. Every purchase Catherine made was a mirror held up to his soul, and the reflection was unbearable. His phone buzzed again at 4:18 p.m. Laundromat, $12.50. She was washing their clothes. With unlimited funds, she could have bought new wardrobes. Instead, she was being practical, responsible, dignified. Gregory sank onto his sofa and put his head in his hands. Catherine Wallace wasn't playing the role he'd assigned her. She wasn't proving his father right. She was dismantling everything Gregory had built his identity upon, one modest transaction at a time. And the most terrifying part was that he had 11 hours left to watch his worldview collapse. Marcus arrived at the penthouse unannounced at 7:34 p.m. Gregory heard the private elevator chime and knew immediately something was wrong. His assistant never showed up without calling first. Never disrupted the carefully maintained boundaries between professional and personal. But when the elevator doors opened, Marcus stepped out with his laptop bag and an expression Gregory had never seen before. Fear mixed with something harder. Accusation. "We need to talk," Marcus said. "No greeting. No preamble." Gregory stood from the sofa where he'd been monitoring his phone like a man watching a timer count down to detonation. "What's wrong?" Marcus set his laptop on the marble dining table and opened it with movements that were too controlled, too deliberate. "I ran a background check. Used the transaction locations to narrow down the search parameters. Cross-referenced with our security footage from the grocery store. It took me 6 hours, but I found her." "Found who?" "Catherine Wallace." Marcus turned the laptop screen toward Gregory. A driver's license photo filled the display. Catherine's face looked back at him, younger in the picture, less exhausted, but unmistakably her. Age 33. Former healthcare administrator at Northwestern Memorial. Clean record. No criminal history. One dependent, daughter age 7. "I don't understand why you're here." Marcus clicked to another screen. Property record. Gregory's blood went cold before he even read the address. Parkview Homes. Unit 4B. Catherine Wallace. Tenant from March 2019 until June of last year. Marcus's voice was flat, professional, but his eyes burned with something Gregory couldn't quite name. "Your company acquired Parkview Homes in April, demolished it in July, displaced 74 families with 30 days notice and minimal relocation assistance." The room tilted. Gregory sat down heavily, his legs suddenly unreliable. "That's not possible. It's documented. She lived there with her daughter. Paid rent on time every month. Then Coulter Development bought the property, and 3 months later she was out. According to public records, she lost her job 2 months after that. Couldn't afford market-rate housing on unemployment. Ended up in transitional housing, then a shelter, then nowhere." Gregory's mind raced through the Parkview acquisition. He remembered it vaguely. A mid-sized property in a gentrifying neighborhood. Good bones, poor maintenance, majority low-income tenants. His development team had presented it as an opportunity. Prime location. Minimal resistance expected. The building had been worth more empty than occupied. Standard practice. He'd signed the acquisition papers without visiting the property, without meeting the tenants, without thinking about the 74 families whose lives he was about to disrupt. "She knows," Gregory said quietly. "She knew who I was in that grocery store. Probably. Her former address was 6 blocks from that store. It's likely her old neighborhood." Marcus closed the laptop. "Gregory, this isn't a social experiment anymore. This is a legal nightmare waiting to happen. You handed your unlimited credit card to a woman your company displaced. If she goes public, if she connects this to Parkview, the optics are catastrophic. She hasn't spent recklessly. That makes it worse. She's documenting restraint, building a narrative. Smart woman, former administrator. She knows how this looks. You displaced her, destroyed her stability, then offered her a credit card like some kind of twisted charity. The media will eat this alive." Gregory stood and walked to the window. Chicago sprawled below him, indifferent to his crisis. Somewhere in that darkness, Catherine Wallace was making her final purchases with his card, and every transaction was building a case against him. Not a legal case, though that might come. Something worse. A moral case. Evidence that his empire was built on the wreckage of lives like hers. Pull the transaction history, Gregory said. I need to see everything she bought. Why? Because I need to know if she's planning to destroy me, or if she's just trying to survive what I already did to her. Marcus opened his laptop again, but his expression said he already knew the answer. Catherine Wallace didn't need to plan Gregory's destruction. Gregory had built it himself, one demolished building at a time, and handed her the keys. The call came at 8:47 a.m., exactly 22 hours into the experiment. Gregory's head of PR, Diana Chun, didn't bother with pleasantries. We have a situation. Chicago Tribune just called asking for comment on a story about you giving your credit card to a homeless woman. They have details, specific details. The grocery store location, the 24-hour time frame. They're running it tomorrow morning. Gregory's coffee went cold in his hand. He was standing in his kitchen, having managed maybe 2 hours of sleep on the sofa. How did they get this? Someone at the store, most likely. Maybe an employee. Maybe another customer. Doesn't matter. They have it, and they want a statement by noon. Diana's voice carried the clip deficiency of someone already in damage control mode. I need to know what we're dealing with. Is this a publicity stunt? A genuine charitable impulse? Please tell me you didn't do this on a whim. It was a personal decision. Personal decisions made in public grocery stores tend to become public problems. What's the woman's name? Gregory hesitated. Saying her name out loud felt like crossing a threshold. Catherine Wallace. The silence on Diana's end lasted 3 seconds too long. Give me an hour. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't even think about responding to the Tribune until I call you back. She hung up. Gregory's phone immediately buzzed with a text from Marcus. Board meeting called for 10 a.m. Emergency session. They know. Of course they knew. Gregory's board consisted of 12 men and women who'd built careers on reading market signals and anticipating threats. A billionaire CEO handing unlimited credit to a stranger was exactly the kind of erratic behavior that triggered alarm bells. Gregory could already hear their questions. Is he having a breakdown? Is this affecting his judgment? Should we be concerned about his decision-making capacity? His phone lit up again. Diana, we need to talk. Now, conference call in 5 minutes. Don't make me repeat myself. The conference call included Diana, Marcus, and Gregory's lead attorney, Robert Hashimoto. Diana spoke first. Catherine Wallace is not homeless. She's in transitional housing according to public records. Former healthcare administrator. Lost her housing when Diana paused and Gregory could hear papers shuffling. When Coulter Development acquired and demolished Parkview Homes 8 months ago. Please tell me you knew this before you handed her your credit card. I didn't. Robert's voice cut in, sharp and precise. This is a legal exposure on multiple levels. If she claims this was hush money or an admission of wrongdoing related to the Parkview acquisition, we're looking at potential litigation. If she claims emotional distress, duress, or coercion, we have problems. If she goes public saying you offered her money to absolve your guilt over displacing her family, the optics are apocalyptic. I didn't offer her money. I offered her a credit card for 24 hours. That's worse, Robert said flatly. It looks like you turned her survival into a social experiment. It looks like you're playing games with someone you already harmed. Diana jumped back in. Social media is already picking it up. Someone posted a photo from the grocery store. It's blurry but identifiable. Twitter is calling you everything from a philanthropist to a sociopath. The hashtag credit card experiment is trending in Chicago. We have maybe 6 hours before this becomes a national story. Gregory sank into a chair at his dining table. The city outside his windows looked the same as always, indifferent and vast, but his world was imploding. What do you recommend? Honestly, pray she doesn't talk to the Tribune. Pray she returns the card tonight and disappears. Because if Catherine Wallace decides to tell her story, There's no PR strategy that saves you from this. Diana's voice softened slightly. Gregory, what were you thinking? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, none of them adequate. He'd been thinking about his father's philosophy. He'd been thinking about proving cynicism correct. He'd been thinking about anything except the actual human being he'd handed his card to and the life his company had already destroyed. His phone buzzed with a notification. Twitter alert. Someone had posted a photo of Catherine at the grocery store checkout, his platinum card in her hand. The caption read, "Billionaire developer gives credit card to woman his company made homeless. Guilt or PR stunt?" The narrative was already written. Gregory was losing control of his own story, and he had 2 hours until Catherine returned his card and either saved him or buried him completely. Gregory arrived at the grocery store at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. Robert sat beside him in the back of the town car, a leather portfolio containing the settlement offer resting on his lap. $500,000. Generous relocation assistance. A non-disclosure agreement. Legal release of all claims related to Parkview Homes. Robert had structured it perfectly, every clause designed to make this nightmare disappear. "Let me do the talking," Robert said. "You hand back the card. I present the offer. We're out in 10 minutes. Gregory nodded but said nothing. Through the tinted windows, he watched the grocery store entrance. The same automatic doors Catherine had walked through 24 hours ago. The same fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the pavement. Everything looked identical, but Gregory felt like a different person than the man who'd stood here yesterday, arrogant and certain in his father's philosophy. Catherine arrived at exactly 10 p.m. She wasn't alone. Her daughter walked beside her, wearing the new coat and boots from the Target receipt. Behind them was a woman Gregory didn't recognize, late 50s, carrying herself with the upright posture of someone who'd spent a career in courtrooms or boardrooms. Robert saw her too. She brought representation. They met in the customer service area, a fluorescent alcove near the front of the store. Catherine carried a manila folder. Her expression was calm, controlled, completely unreadable. She looked at Gregory with eyes that held no anger, no gratitude, nothing he could interpret or manipulate. "Mr. Coulter," she said. Not a greeting, a statement of fact. Gregory extended his hand. Catherine didn't take it. Instead, she opened the manila folder and removed his platinum card, placing it on the customer service counter between them. Beside it, she laid out receipts. Every single transaction from the past 24 hours, organized chronologically, each one annotated in neat handwriting. CVS, $47.83. My daughter had a fever. Children's Tylenol, cough medicine, thermometer. Catherine's voice was steady, almost clinical. Target, $89.50. Winter coat and boots because hers had a broken zipper and her feet were growing out of her old boots. Grocery store, $156.32. 2 weeks of actual food, not processed garbage because I know how to make a dollar stretch. She moved to the next receipt. Women's shelter donation, $40. Because I spent 3 weeks there last fall, and they deserve support. Another receipt. Laundromat, $12.50. Because we needed clean clothes for a job interview I have tomorrow. Robert started to speak. Catherine held up one hand, silencing him without looking in his direction. I knew who you were the moment you approached me, she said, her eyes locked on Gregory. I recognized your face from the Parkview Homes acquisition meetings. You didn't attend them, but your photo was in the presentation materials. Coulter Development Corporation, founder and CEO. The man who signed the papers that displaced 74 families, including mine. Gregory's throat constricted. He couldn't speak. I could have maxed out your card. Bought everything I've been denied for 8 months. Designer clothes. Electronics.
À Luxury Hotel Suite.
I could have made you pay, literally, for what you did to my community. Catherine's voice remained level. but something fierce burned beneath the surface. But I won't let your guilt buy my silence, and I won't let your money turn me into what you think poor people are. You wanted to prove your father's theory about poverty and moral character. Congratulations. You proved the opposite. She pushed the folder across the counter. Inside were all the receipts and a single additional document. A handwritten letter. That's for the Chicago Tribune. I'm giving them my story tomorrow. Not because I want revenge. Because 73 other families deserve accountability. Robert opened his portfolio. Ms. Wallace, we have a settlement offer that I think you'll find. I don't want your money, Catherine interrupted. I want your company to change. The customer service area felt impossibly small. Gregory stood across from Catherine, Robert beside him radiating expensive legal authority, and for the first time in 2 decades, he saw himself with complete clarity. Not the vision his father had installed in him. Not the narrative he'd constructed to justify his empire. The truth, unfiltered and unbearable. He was a man who'd built billions on the rubble of other people's lives and called it success. Ms. Wallace? Robert began again, his voice smooth and practiced. The settlement offer includes provisions that would benefit not just you but... Stop! Gregory's voice surprised him. Came out raw, stripped of the polish he usually maintained. Robert, wait outside. His attorney's eyes widened. Gregory, I strongly advise. Outside, please. Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Gregory's expression stopped him. He gathered his portfolio, nodded curtly, and walked toward the exit. The automatic doors hissed closed behind him, leaving Gregory alone with Catherine, her daughter, and the older woman who still hadn't spoken. Catherine's companion stepped forward slightly.
I'm Margaret Chen.
I volunteer with the Parkview Families Coalition. 74 families displaced. Some found housing. Most didn't. 3 ended up in shelters. 1 family is living in their car. Your company offered them each $1,500 and called it relocation assistance. The numbers hit Gregory like physical blows. He'd never asked for follow-up reports on displaced tenants. Never requested data on outcomes. The acquisition had been clean, legal, profitable. That's all he'd cared to know. What do you want? Gregory asked, looking directly at Catherine. I told you. Accountability. Real relocation support for every family. Not $1,500. Actual housing assistance. Security deposits. First and last month's rent. Moving costs. Help finding places that will accept families with spotty credit or recent evictions on their records, because your company put them in impossible positions. That will cost millions. You're worth $9.7 billion. Catherine's voice didn't rise, but the words cut clean through him. You'll survive. Gregory felt something crumbling inside his chest. The architecture his father had built there, the scaffolding of justified cruelty, was collapsing. And if I do this? If I provide real support to the Parkview families? You won't go to the Tribune.
No.
Catherine's answer was immediate and firm. This isn't about silence. This is about change. I'm giving them my story regardless. But the story I tell depends on what you do next. I can tell them about a billionaire who displaced families and tried to buy forgiveness with a credit card stunt. Or I can tell them about a man who recognized his harm and chose to make actual amends. Why give me the choice? Why not just destroy me? For the first time, Catherine's controlled expression cracked slightly. Not with anger. With something that looked almost like pity. Because I don't want revenge. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where people can choose to do better. Even people who've done terrible things. Especially them. Her daughter tugged on Catherine's hand, tired and ready to leave. Catherine glanced down, then back at Gregory. You have 48 hours before my Tribune interview. What you do with that time will determine what kind of man you actually are. Gregory looked at the receipts spread across the counter. $47.83, $89.50, $156.32, $40. Evidence of character he'd assumed didn't exist in people like Catherine. Evidence that every assumption his father had poured into him was poison disguised as wisdom. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "Not just housing assistance. I'll restructure how Coulter Development handles acquisitions. Community impact assessments. Mandatory relocation support. Fair market buyouts for displaced tenants. All of it." Catherine studied him for a long moment. "Words are easy, Mr. Coulter. Let's see if your actions match them." She gathered her receipts, took her daughter's hand, and walked toward the exit. Margaret Chin followed, but paused beside Gregory. 73 families are waiting to see if you mean it. Don't make them wait long." Then they were gone, and Gregory stood alone in the fluorescent light of a grocery store, his platinum card on the counter, his empire hanging in the balance. He could call Robert back. Fight this. Protect his company with legal warfare and aggressive PR. His board would demand it. His father's voice in his memory screamed for it. But Gregory was exhausted from carrying his father's legacy. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, and get me the full list of Parkview families. Every name, every current address if we have it, every detail we can find. We have work to do." 6 months later, Gregory stood in a construction site that looked nothing like the developments he'd built for 20 years. The building rising from the foundation wasn't a luxury tower. It was a mixed-income residential complex with 40% of units designated affordable, designed in partnership with the community it would serve. The architecture wasn't flashy. It was functional, dignified, built to last. Built for people who needed homes, not investors who needed returns. Catherine walked beside him, tablet in hand, reviewing the latest community feedback surveys. She wore a professional blazer and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned her authority through competence, not charity. As Director of Community Relations for Coulter Development, she'd transformed from displaced tenant to the person who made sure displacement never happened the same way again. "The retail space on the ground floor," Catherine said, pointing to the eastern corner of the building. 3 local business owners from the neighborhood have submitted proposals. A bookstore, a cafe, and a family-owned grocery. The selection committee meets next week. Gregory nodded, studying the plans. "What's the community preference?" "Split between the bookstore and the cafe. Both would serve the neighborhood well. The grocery store owner has the weakest business plan but the most need. His previous location was demolished for a development project 2 years ago. Not ours," she added. "But he's understandably cautious about corporate promises. Schedule a meeting with him. See if we can provide business planning support. If his concept is solid but his execution needs work, we should help, not eliminate him." Catherine made a note on her tablet. This was their dynamic now. Not billionaire and charity case. Not guilt and forgiveness. Partnership built on the wreckage of his old philosophy and her refusal to let him take the easy way out. The Chicago Tribune article had run 6 months ago. Catherine had told her story with devastating clarity. The headline read, "From Displacement to Dignity. One woman's 24-hour test of a billionaire's character." The article detailed Parkview homes, the minimal relocation assistance, Catherine's descent into housing instability, and Gregory's credit card experiment. But it also covered what happened after. The press conference where Gregory admitted his company's failures. The establishment of the Parkview Families Fund with $10 million in immediate assistance. The policy changes. The commitment to community-centered development. The response had been brutal and beautiful in equal measure. Half the business community called him naive, soft, a betrayal of shareholder interests. 3 board members resigned. His company's stock value dropped 8%. Investors questioned his leadership. But something unexpected happened. Younger investors, impact-focused funds, and socially conscious developers reached out. Coulter Development became a case study in corporate transformation. Applications for positions tripled. The talent pool shifted from cutthroat MBA graduates to people who wanted to build things that mattered. The company was less profitable now. Gregory's personal net worth had dropped to 8.9 billion. He felt wealthier than he'd ever been. Mr. Chun wants to meet with you at 3, Catherine said, scrolling through the schedule. He has concerns about the timeline for the community center. Valid concerns? Always. He's been keeping developers honest for 30 years. We should listen. Gregory smiled slightly. 6 months ago, a community organizer raising concerns would have been an obstacle to eliminate. Now it was data to incorporate. Catherine had taught him that. She taught him a lot of things, mostly by refusing to let him perform redemption instead of earning it. They walked through the construction site, hard hats required, boots crunching on gravel. Workers called out greetings. The foreman updated them on progress. Everything felt tangible, real, connected to human outcomes rather than abstract profit margins. My daughter asked about you yesterday, Catherine said as they paused near the building's entrance. She wanted to know if you're a good person now or if you're still figuring it out. What did you tell her? That people aren't good or bad. They're just people who make choices. And you're making better choices than you used to. Gregory looked at the building rising before them. Not a monument to his ego. A home for families who needed stability. Is that enough? It's a start. Catherine checked her watch. We have the affordability committee meeting in 20 minutes. They're tough. Prepare to be challenged. Good. They walked toward the trailer that served as the temporary office, and Gregory realized something that would have horrified his father. He was happier taking hard questions from community members than he'd ever been closing billion-dollar deals in boardrooms. The work was harder, the profit margins thinner, the praise less frequent. But when he woke up at 3 a.m. now, it wasn't emptiness that kept him awake. It was planning, problem-solving, trying to figure out how to do better. His father's voice, that constant whisper of cynicism and justified cruelty, had finally gone quiet. Not because Gregory had proven him wrong in some dramatic confrontation, but because Gregory had simply stopped listening. He'd found a better philosophy, one that measured success in families housed rather than dollars accumulated. Catherine held the trailer door open. Inside, community representatives waited with questions, concerns, demands for accountability. Gregory took a breath and stepped inside. Not as the man who'd given a credit card to prove a point. As the man still learning what it meant to build something worth more than money. The work of amends was never finished. But for the first time in his life, Gregory Coulter was doing work that actually mattered. Thank you for watching. Take a few seconds to subscribe, like, and share this story to your loved ones. See you tomorrow.